Welcome back to U.S. Farm Report this weekend. Mark Gold and Brian Splitt rejoining us. All right, we just took a deep dive looking at the rail situation, the concerns about a possible strike. You know, the rail situation wasn't as bad as what some had feared this harvest. We did kick the can down the road when it comes to that strike. But when you look at bases, if we do end up seeing rail workers strike, Mark, what could we see happen to bases this time of year?
Well, I believe that there's going to be a lot of grain out here. I believe farmers are going to have to move a lot of grain. The rail strike won't help it. Farmers have been asking me for the last 2-3 weeks, what do we do with grain in the bin, corn and beans? And I just ask them, what's your basis? And when they tell me it's 75 to $1.25 over on corn and 50 to 75 cents over on beans, I have no idea why they're storing grain. It doesn't pay to carry it. It's the fear of missing out, FOMO, that's keeping guys from selling grain. Can the basis go higher? I suppose it can, but I don't see it going a whole lot higher no matter what happens. And if some of these things do hit the market, like Brian said, this basis can fall apart in a hurry. And the problem is, once this thing starts to roll, it's going to move faster than the American farmer is going to move on it. So, I implore these guys out here, if you've got grain in the bin, sell it, re-own it with a call option. If for some reason you're still hesitant to sell it, particularly on new crop, you need to have some puts underneath because this thing could get ugly. Again, I never predict prices. I look at risk. And to me, the risk is certainly out there.
Yeah, and you look at that risk, but at the same time, you can't ignore the fact, Brian, that we do have a grain deficit in the West. I mean, you look at the poor yields, you look at those cattle producers right now that are going anywhere they can to get grain, paying way over the board to get that feed. So is that something that does provide a floor under this market as well, though?
Well, that's going to be a cash market issue, and the market's going to have to find a way to get grain from where it is to where it needs to be. But I don't think that means that the board price can't go down. And in the big picture right now, you've got a lot of things, and Mark had mentioned this, you've got very strong basis. You have producers that are putting grain in the bin, hoping it gets stronger, and maybe it will in the short term. December is typically a period of time where you see a good peak in basis. But as we look ahead, we have to remember that, the idea of rationing demand, a lot of people will look at the futures market and say, oh, well, we had futures hit 750 for corn and we couldn't get through 7. So are we really rationing demand? But it's the cash market that's rationing that demand. It's the futures plus what the basis is doing. And so I think we've got some issues here where as we go into the end of the year, the beginning of 2023, we'll see if yesterday the USDA started a trend of these crops getting bigger. Do they get bigger again in January? And will we see that export demand come back down? And I think Mark is correct about that. You look at corn for export, we're going to have to see Mexico step up. They did a little bit of buying before the September WASDE report. They did a little bit of buying before the quarterly report. They did a little bit of buying before this November WASDE report. But this is the time of year where Mexico will typically purchase 1.5 million, 2 million tons. And now they're talking about not buying GMO corn for 2023, and that's going to be a problem.
When you look at the CPI, Mark, that data that came out this week, a little bit better than what some had expected. We've been talking about recession. We've been talking about inflation. But considering that CPI wasn't as bad as some had expected, is that a plus for the commodity markets as we look in these months ahead?
Honestly, I don't see it. The stock market on Thursday really at 1,000 points on the CPI. It's still not good. We're still looking at higher interest rates next month, maybe again after the first of the year. I think they want to get the interest rates somewhere between 5 and 5.5%. So, we've had these rallies before, and generally they've been fairly good sales up here. On the grain side of it, though, I'd like to say that one of the things we've seen consistently over the last several months is every time we get a hard break in a market, every time we get a hard rally in the market, the end users are in there on the buy side, the pros are in there on the sell side, and I think the end users will continue to be here on the breaks until we get to the first of the year. First of the year, if we're looking at a huge Brazilian crop and a big Argentinian crop, I think they're going to start backing off because they'll be able to secure supplies.
All right, Brian, real quick. I know you're keeping a close eye on crypto as well. We've seen the value wash out in some of these cryptos. What does that potentially mean for commodities? Is there something we should be watching when we see those values shift so quickly?
Well, I think number one, when you look at what's happened with FTX, and you've got billions and billions of dollars that have been washed out seemingly overnight, and some of these fund managers that are diversified have assets in commodities, equities, some in crypto, and so anytime there's one entity or one part of that allocation that takes a very big hit, that might require some rebalancing. So if that's the case, we've got the fund manager that's long corn and soybeans. Does that mean they need to reduce the positions to pay for losses in some of their crypto allocations? That's very possible. But then we look at what's happening with the precious metals. You've got gold right now. We started the month of November with gold trading below the October lows. After the CPI data, we're pushing through the October highs. We've got a big monthly reversal in gold. I could see more money coming out of crypto and coming into the precious metals.
All right. Well, Brian, thank you again for your service. Mark, thank you for joining us this weekend. We appreciate it. We need to take a quick break, and then we'll have much more right here on U.S. Farm Report this weekend.